Fast and Furious is one of the most popular and profitable franchises which collects hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office. It taught us to value family, gave us a lot of memes, and of course, a scene with a flight into space by car. But Fast and the Furious has not always been successful. In the noughties, the franchise had every chance to be closed and forgotten by the audience, and the careers of Vin Diesel and Paul Walker could have failed with it. Today on About Movies, we will talk about all the ups and downs of Fast and the Furious.
Salute me, familia. Salute.
How did it turn from an action movie about racing into a real epic? And why does it remain popular despite the banal plots and violation of all the laws of physics? Now you'll find out everything. Nowadays, a lot of things that could have happened with the first part of Fast and the Furious may seem ridiculous. But for example, Timothy Olyphant could play the role of the head of the family. The actor received an offer, but he refused. Timothy chose a supporting role in the film Gone in 60 Seconds. In those years, Fast and Furious was an incomprehensible film with a budget of $30 to $35 million, and Gone in 60 Seconds was a $90 million action movie with a superstar in the title role. That is, in theory, you could expect more bonuses for yourself just from Gone in 60 Seconds, and he collected a little more Fast and Furious at the box office. That's only because of the big budget. Everyone earned much less, and Timothy did not receive any bonuses. And the role that Jordana Brewster eventually played could have been gotten by Jessica Biel. She didn't want to be filmed somewhere else, but lost to Brewster at the audition. Christian Bale was also sometimes mentioned in relation to the Fast and the Furious, but he refused himself, or the studio just dreamed of him. It's not entirely clear. Why he didn't join the film was not reported, but in theory, the family could look a little different. Paul Walker was the first to get the role in the film from the main cast. Director Rob Cohen offered the studio the candidacy of Walker, with whom he worked on the film The Skulls. He was quickly approved as he fit the description in the script. There was a slight hitch with Vin Diesel. Rob Cohen wanted to see the actor Mario Lopez in his place, since according to the script, Toretto was much younger than Diesel. But the producers were already against it, and praising Cohen for his efforts, offered to look at Vin more closely. Diesel at that moment was just working on the film Reindeer Games, and having received an offer from the producers of Fast and the Furious, he asked to expand his role. And for a long time, he communicated with the director, offering the necessary changes into the script. When he succeeded, he immediately left Reindeer Games. The film was shot for 2.5 months, and the greatest difficulties for the creators was caused by the vehicle fleet. Some cars had to be delivered from Japan. But what was more surprising, although some of the cars were taken with the expectation that 2 of the 3 would definitely break, in fact, less than a quarter of the cars were broken, and most of them could be fixed. Director Rob Cohen said that none of them expected any great success from the film. And at that moment, the studio's advertising campaign worked 100%. The movie managed to sell to the American audience. In its debut weekend, the film, with unknown actors, soared to the top of the chart, taking in $40 million. Of the top 8 films, Fast and Furious also had the least number of screenings. According to the results of the World Rental, Fast and Furious got $207 million, with production on a budget of $38 million. It was the first film that initiated the hysteria of street racing, which immediately went to the masses. The first Fast and the Furious was still showing in cinemas when the studio said to several screenwriters to work on the sequel. They had to come up with the ideas of a sequel for different characters of the first film. As it turned out, the rush in that direction was not in vain. Problems arose with the director of the film and Vin Diesel, who wanted new challenges. Although several different speculations were connected with that moment, one of which was that Vin Diesel demanded too much of a fee for shooting in the sequel, which the studio refused to pay him. And it was because of that his hero was absent in Too Fast, Too Furious. But nowadays, the studio's official response, which was voiced personally by Vin Diesel, sounds a little different. He claims that Universal Studio offered him $25 million to return to his role. However, he refused, as he did not like the studio's approach to the sequel at all. Diesel believed that the second film should continue the story of the first and not follow the archaic way of sequels from the 80s, when each new part was a separate film. He had to leave the project due to disagreements that could not be bypassed. Together with Rob Cohen, they went to work on the film XXX, and the studio, not really worrying, decided to make a new movie around Paul Walker's hero. Moreover, in the first film, he seemed to be in the main role, and Diesel's hero was the supporting character. John Singleton, who had just released the action movie Shaft, took the place of director Rob Cohen. As a big fan of improvisations, he completely untied the hands of all the actors. Because of that, everyone in the film began to come up with jokes, with or without cause. There was a widespread myth about the second film of the franchise that the cars of the picture were chosen by Paul Walker, who was known for his love of fast driving. Officially, that wasn't the case at all. All the cars shown in the film were selected by the studio. After the success of the first picture, automakers lined up with suitcases full of money. When the biggest of them were opened, the studio offered possible car options to a technical consultant. He was already selecting the most interesting samples from what was chosen by the studio. Although Vin Diesel was unavailable for the film, the producers still wanted to introduce someone from the first film into the plot. And director John Singleton wanted to bring back rapper Ja Rule in the second part. But according to Singleton, Ja Rule refused him, saying that he was too cool for the proposed role. Singleton quickly changed the character, and Ludacris got the role, who was not so cool. Afterwards, he would become a member of the family. And Ja Rule got the role in the movie Half Past Dead, where he did not fit on the screen because of Steven Seagal. After that, Ja Rule was already completely upset and went to a real prison. The second Fast and Furious cost $76 million. Some of them were spent to rent the mansion of the main bully. Once, it was the country house of actor Sylvester Stallone, but then he got tired of it. At the release, Too Fast, Too Furious had already taken $50 million, ahead of Finding Nemo. But then something went wrong, and the film began to lose ground quickly. In total, the picture got $236 million at the global box office, which was not a bad result, but the studio's income sagged significantly in comparison with the first film. Too Fast, Too Furious was panned by critics and received 2 nominations for the Golden Raspberry Award. Work on the third film was postponed. The pause was necessary in order to determine the direction of the development of the series. Several scripts were written for the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift at once. The chosen script initially provided for participation in the film by Paul Walker, but the producers kept making edits to it, and in the end, they decided that a younger actor would look best in it. They said goodbye to Walker, and Channing Tatum could have played the main role in the film. The actor auditioned, but the new director, Justin Lin, did not like him. The filmmaker insisted that the main hero should not have a model appearance, so Channing went to starring up in Step Up, which would be a breakthrough for him. The producer, Neil Moritz, approved director Justin Lin after watching the movie Better Luck Tomorrow. The producer liked the director's work and convinced the studio that Lin was exactly what Fast and Furious needed. Afterwards, Vin Diesel would agree with him. Tokyo Drift is often joked about, pointing out that the age difference between the characters and the actors playing them was too big. It was the jokes like, "It's amazing how they haven't thought of taking a pensioner for the role of schoolchildren yet." Lucas Black got especially harsh criticism, but at the time of filming the movie Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, Lucas Black was only 22 years old and he was approved at 21, and he played an 18-year-old. That was, in terms of real age, he did not look at all fit for such jokes. There was another funny moment in that movie that allowed us to play with time in the future. The film took place in 2013, although it was shot in 2006. The 4th, 5th, and 6th parts of Fast and Furious chronologically were prequels to Tokyo Drift. The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift cost $85 million, although initially the studio was going to save after the second part and spend a maximum of $60 million on production. There was such an increase in the budget after the test screenings. They went very badly and the picture began to be remade. The studio turned to Vin Diesel just after that. The studio tried to somehow raise the box office potential of the movie and therefore went for all requirements of the actor. Vin's cameo in the film cost Universal Studios the rights to Riddick, which it didn't really need after the failure of the Chronicles of Riddick. And plus, Vin wanted producing authorities for him in future films of the series. It's hard to say how much the reshoots helped the film. We've all watched the already remade version, and in that case, we wouldn't be able to know another version. Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift collected the smallest box office of all the films in the franchise. It is also the only movie in the franchise that can be considered a failure. The film collected $158 million, and in the American box office, it was a ridiculous $62 million. If the studio got any money, it came after Tokyo Drift was released on videotapes. Although, there was a point with the fact that these days Tokyo Drift is often remembered fondly. At the time of release, it was criticized both from critics and from the audience, so it is likely that with some achievements on videotape, everything was also sad for the movie. For Vin Diesel, who turned to the Fast and the Furious, the franchise became a salvation. He failed with all his films in a row, and one or two more failures like Babylon AD, and the actor could disappear in movies of an incomprehensible category, released immediately on videotape. When the studio gave the green light to shoot the fourth part, Vin Diesel, who had gained a lot of control over it, tried to turn the focus with a double blow. The actor insisted the fourth and fifth films should be shot simultaneously, but the studio refused him, bearing in mind the Tokyo Drift box office. Instead, the actor was offered to shoot a small short film leading to a full-length one, and from the rest of the material to make one movie. In the end, they did so. The new Fast and Furious got $85 million on production, the same amount as the problematic Tokyo Drift spent. They managed to save on all of the actors' fees. Paul Walker, who received $7 million for the second film, worked there only for food, as the talent producer Vin Diesel did himself. In the case of Walker, luck was also on the side of Fast and Furious. Things were going even worse for him than for Diesel, and before the fourth part of Fast and Furious, he had already starred in films released immediately on videotape. So he was ready to return to the studio films for one of the main roles, even for free. The family returned to the big screen in 2009 and came back with the best start for Universal Studios in its history. For its debut American weekend, the fourth part of Fast and Furious collected more money than Tokyo Drift for the entire time of home rental. In total, the picture got $360 million in the world box office.
I wouldn't piss them off, guys.
Studio bosses quickly began to run around Vin Diesel and throw money at him. In the fifth film, the head of the family did not offend himself and asked for $15 million for his leadership. The rest received a little less, $10 million, and they had to be divided by everyone. But we think in that situation, no one could condemn Diesel. Without his initiatives, the whole family would have been trading on the market. The fifth Fast and Furious is the very film to which the franchise should be grateful for its up. It was on it that the franchise got a higher league level in the terms of box office numbers. The appearance of Dwayne Johnson was to blame for that, or the script, which by mistake turned out to have a couple more pages and was unclear. Many believed that it was the fifth film of the franchise that turned out to be the most high quality and fascinating. And which part of the Fast and the Furious do you like the most, and why? Share your opinion in the comments. The box office receipts that collected over $600 million showed the producers that they could make a franchise out of Fast and Furious, which everyone would envy. Fast and Furious, and specifically Diesel, are often criticized. The fifth part is cited as an example that the whole family should be grateful to one person. There would not have been much success without him. And in general, it was difficult to argue with that, but only there was one nuance. Critics often omit the fact that few people needed Dwayne Johnson before Fast and Furious. Whatever Dwayne gave Fast and Furious, the franchise gave him much more. Before that movie, Dwayne starred in small action films like Faster and failed at the box office with Race to Witch Mountain and Tooth Fairy. While preparing for the film, no one thought about Dwayne, so in those years, he was unwanted. Diesel wanted to involve Tommy Lee Jones to the project, but he had a contract with Men in Black and Captain America: The First Avenger, and he could not take the time. That's when Dwayne was called because he was free. According to rumors, that happened at all because of a post on social networks in which someone suggested taking a mountain of muscles to the cinema and throwing it into Vin Diesel. In general, the point was that Dwayne himself, with all his desire, could not give any profits to any film in those years. And the fifth part of Fast and the Furious was his ups. Dwayne Johnson gained more benefit than the others. Costing $125 million, the fifth film collected $626 million at the global box office. Everyone was already flooded with money on the release of the sixth film. there was so much money that the franchise completely said goodbye to all the laws of physics, and not only Vin Diesel, but also Paul Walker received $15 million for his participation. Since Dwayne Johnson signed a contract for 3 films at once, he received much less for his participation. But obviously, he agreed with the statement that an ungrateful family should bow down at his feet. Although their conflict with Vin Diesel was in the press later, the heart of it was not in the reasons that talented actors talked about. Perhaps money was to blame for everything there too. The 6th film was also assembled from scripts that were supposed to be used in 2 films. In one of them, there was a final with a tank, and another one was with a runway that went through the whole of Europe. But Vin Diesel believed that the viewer should be surprised as often as possible, and therefore the works of the screenwriters were combined in one film. If the conflict between Johnson and Diesel happened for unknown reasons, then the constant swearing in the press between Johnson and Tyrese Gibson started because of The Rock's improvisation. Gibson got jokes about his appearance throughout the filming several times. Although everyone had fun and some of those improvisations were included in the movie, Gibson did not find jokes about his big forehead funny. So whenever possible, he got into arguments with Dwayne on social networks. The 6th film had already cost $160 million and collected $788 at the world box office. That case was often attributed to the modest performance of the film Star Trek Into Darkness. The movies were released with a difference of 1 week, and especially at the global box office, Cosmonauts had suffered a lot. After the 6th film of the franchise, director Justin Lin left it for a new challenge, having worked on 4 movies in a row. He left the project to direct Star Trek Beyond, which performed even worse than Star Trek Into Darkness at the box office. James Wan came in his place. Before Furious 7, he directed Saw and The Conjuring. Diesel believed that the director of horror films would be able to bring something new to the series, and Wan was interested in working on a large-scale action movie. Furious 7 was going to cost the same $160 million. In that film, Jason Statham joined the family. Fast and Furious would be a lifeline and help restart his career. After all, his last films, like Wild Card, no longer hit the American box office, and the rest failed without a chance. Filming of the 7th Fast and Furious was regular, and there was only a month left before their end. The movie was going to be released in the spring of 2014, but on November 13, 2013, Paul Walker died in a car accident. For Fast and Furious, that news meant a complete stop of production, since Walker starred in only half of his episodes. The studio even considered canceling that movie and shooting a new one. It would cost Universal $40 million, which had already been spent on production. But after talking with Walker's relatives, it was decided to continue working on the film and say goodbye to the actor with dignity. In different scenes, Paul Walker's character was played by stuntmen and his brothers. Footage from episodes not included in the previous films of the franchise were used in the 7th part. When Fast and Furious 7 released in cinemas in 2015, it broke all the records of the series. And the title track was the top of the charts of different countries for several months. The project, which cost $190 million, collected $1.5 billion at the global box office. Such a jump from $80 million to $1.5 billion was associated with Paul Walker's death.
Tear out the dash. Go through it. Time to unleash the beast.
A similar sharp jump in box office occurred with The Dark Knight Rises. But since The Dark Knight was a great movie and Fast and the Furious was some kind of simple action film, all analysts predicted a huge failure in box office numbers and almost a fiasco for the 8th series. Dwayne Johnson also added fuel to the fire, who was angry in his social networks with a message in which he swore at Vin Diesel on the set of the 8th film. Johnson blamed Diesel for all the franchise's problems and cowardice. Later, it became known that Diesel simply decided not to shoot a few episodes with Dwayne. In his opinion, the film didn't need them, but Dwayne believed that someone was just afraid of competition, and those were the most important episodes of the entire series. At the same time, the spin-off of Fast and the Furious about Hobbs and Shaw was just announced. Many felt that with such an advertising trick used to raise interest in the film about Johnson and Statham's heroes. But since all those arguments about who owed what and who was cooler continued, most likely the matter was different. The 8th film of the franchise was released in 2017 and cost $250 million, collected $1,236 million. The decrease in comparison to the seventh part was noticeable, but the level of box office degradation of Disney's Star Wars was not even close. Despite the fact that there was a nuance in the face of Paul Walker, who certainly affected the box office numbers of the seventh film. In that context, the conflict between Diesel and Johnson only intensified. Since Universal Studios wanted a Marvel-type franchise, it asked them to keep the family values until 2020 and release a spin-off of Hobbs and Shaw in 2019. That pissed off Diesel, and he repeatedly stated his disagreement with that position. It is unlikely that Diesel knew what would happen at the very end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, but that moment would greatly affect the family. As for Hobbs and Shaw, the film received its share of popularity despite its cliché. It's all thanks to The Rock and Statham, who managed to create chemistry between their characters with the help of their charisma and brutality. The Fast and Furious spin-off collected $760 million at the global box office with a budget of $200 million. Those would have been excellent numbers for the original film, but more was expected from the Fast and Furious spin-off. Analysts believe that the film would have at least collected over $800 million at global box offices before the release. Maybe that's why the second part was not announced immediately and there was no rush. In 2021, the producer of the project, Kelly McCormick, made it clear that fans could not hope for an early release of the sequel. According to him, COVID-19, due to which the production of projects was delayed, and the busy schedule of actors would not allow filming to start in the near future. However, work on the film had already begun. Dwayne Johnson even shared some details. The Rock promised that big surprises and large-scale spectacles were waiting for fans, and also hinted that the new action movie would be the opposite of what Fast and the Furious films were in general. Fast and Furious 9 was ready at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. The picture, like other Hollywood films, began to be postponed every month. While the release was changed from 2020 to 2021, it wasn't possible to say about any failures due to the situation with the film distribution in the world. If you look at the box office numbers of the ninth film taking into account that very situation, then everything was not just good, but rather gorgeous. Fast and Furious 9 collected $726 million with a budget of $200 million. Yes, in 2019 it would be almost a failure, but in 2021 it was just excellent results. After the release of the ninth part of the racing epic, it became known for the final film of the franchise would be divided into two parts. The first chapter was called Fast X. Vin Diesel explained the format of the sequels as follows. As you know, we get to travel to all these wonderful places, and they're part of the reason why Fast 10 has to be broken into two different movies. It's because there's so much ground to cover. And there's so many places and so many locations in the world that we have to visit. Obviously, Diesel promised that we would see the whole old family's team, but it will not do without new characters. In January of 2022, it was revealed that Jason Momoa would appear in the franchise as an unnamed antagonist. But that's not all. Brie Larson has also joined the cast, although it is not clear yet which side of the barricade she'll be on. Initially, it was assumed that the director of the 10th part would be Justin Lin, who shot half of the films of that franchise. But suddenly, in April of 2022, he left the project during filming. Lin was replaced by Louis Leterrier, known for his work in both parts of The Transporter. As for the scenario, it is unknown yet, but fans are already beginning to joke that time travel will appear in the new parts. And after all, this is unlikely to surprise anyone. People will just say, well, this is Fast and Furious. In any case, no matter how colorful Fast X is, we will still miss one person. The one with whom the whole story began. A terrible tragedy took the life of Paul Walker, whose career was just beginning. In our other video, we talked about how that happened and what was the cause of Paul's death. Click on the icon that appeared on your screen to find out all the details of that fateful day. We will also be grateful if you like our video. And that's all. About Movies was with you. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.